Yo, listen to me. You don't need more friends, you need more fire. You don't need more applause, you need more alignment. You don't need sympathy, you need strategy. You keep asking the world to understand your pain, but what you need is to understand your power. You think being cold is a weakness? No, being cold is how a savage walks through fire and doesn't get burned. Being detached is how a lion walks through the jungle without needing the approval of sheep. Stop playing small so people around you can feel comfortable. Stop shrinking your roar because the room is full of whispers. Let me tell you something. You don't owe anyone your softness when you're called to war. You don't owe explanations when your obedience is to something high. You weren't made to bend. You were made to break chains. See, when you're attached to their love, their praise, their opinions, you become their prisoner. And a savage can't be caged. A savage can't be tamed. A savage can't be manipulated by emotions because they've trained their soul to answer only to purpose. You want to be a savage? Then stop reacting to everything. Stop crying over temporary rejection when you've been assigned eternal elevation. You want them to like you. You want them to clap for you. But you were built to climb, not be carried. So if the applause stops, keep climbing. If the support ends, keep grinding. You're not here for people, you're here for purpose. And purpose don't need comfort. Purpose don't need company. Purpose needs conviction. Listen to me, detachment isn't apathy, it's wisdom. I don't need to be cold. I need to be cold. I don't need to be liked. I need to be led. So I detach from the drama, from the gossip, from the approval, because anything that distracts me from destiny is an enemy in disguise. You think savages don't feel pain? We do, but we've trained ourselves to respond, not react. We bleed, we cry, but we don't let emotions write our legacy. We let purpose write it in fire. A savage doesn't walk around begging for peace. They bring peace to the battlefield. They don't need to be understood. They've been chosen, not voted in. A savage is so locked in with God, so aligned with vision, they don't waste time proving their worth to people who can't even see their value. If you want to be a savage, stop being emotional about temporary people. Stop letting your feelings dictate your future. Be still enough to hear God. Be quiet enough to trust His plan. Be strong enough to walk alone until destiny sends who was ordained to walk beside you. Do you want to be a savage? Then wake up and detach from anything that doesn't feed your future. Silence is your weapon. Stillness is your shield. Purpose is your compass. And destiny is your home. So be a savage, not because it sounds cool, not because it looks tough, but because you were born to conquer, not to cope, because you were called to rule, not to retreat. Because this world doesn't need another people pleaser. It needs a savage led by purpose, fueled by fire, and detached from everything that doesn't glorify their assignments. Now go get it and don't look back. A savage doesn't need validation because purpose is its own reward. When you truly understand who you are and why you're here, you stop looking to people to confirm your calling. You stop asking the world to clap for a vision they were never given. Most people are spectators to your purpose, not co-authors. And yet so many waste their energy waiting for cheers, likes, reposts, or applause that was never promised. But a savage knows, I don't need your agreement to obey God. I don't need your affirmation to move forward. What fuels me isn't approval, it's assignment. Validation is addictive when you don't know your identity. But when your life is purpose-driven, the only yes you need is from heaven. The savage understands that external applause doesn't validate internal alignment. You don't measure progress by attention, you measure it by obedience. The savage wakes up every morning knowing that being misunderstood is part of being chosen. That rejection is often a sign of redirection. That when you're truly walking in your calling, people will question your timing, your tone, your decisions, because it doesn't fit their comfort zone. You got to understand something. The purpose will cost you popularity. And a savage is okay with that. The savage doesn't flinch when the phone doesn't ring, doesn't waver when the text doesn't come, doesn't shrink when the compliments stop. Why? Because the assignment is louder than the silence. Purpose gives you tunnel vision. You stop chasing validation and start chasing impact. You stop performing and you start planning. You stop entertaining and you start building. Because at the end of the day, the fruit is the proof, not their opinion. Some people will never understand your grind because they don't carry your grace. Some will question your decisions because they can't comprehend your destination. But a savage isn't moved by their confusion. A savage walks by conviction. The reason you can detach from needing validation is because you've already been affirmed by the one who gave you the vision. God already signed off on it. You don't need another signature. Validation is a trap that keeps people small. It convinces you to dim your light so others don't feel uncomfortable. It trains you to water yourself down, to dilute your purpose just so you can be accepted. But purpose was never meant to be palatable. A savage doesn't dilute truth for the sake of acceptance. A savage doesn't soften the mission so it can be more digestible. A savage understands that walking in divine purpose will often look like rebellion to those who are stuck in routine. So when you see a savage quiet in a room, just know they're not weak, they're watching. When they don't respond to disrespect, it's not because they're scared, it's because they're strategic. And when they walk away from fake praise and empty flattery, it's because they've learned the secret purpose is the reward, not the spotlight, not the applause, not the crowd, just the assignment. Done well, done faithfully, done without needing to be seen. Detachment is not weakness, it's dominion. The world has twisted the meaning of strength. It tells you that being emotional, reactive, and loud means you're alive and bold. But in truth, real strength is measured in restraint. It's found in the moments you could respond, but choose stillness. You could argue, but choose silence. You could chase, but choose surrender. The savage knows this. Dominion begins where distraction ends. And distraction thrives in emotional dependency. When you are constantly tied to people, outcomes, and feelings, you are easily moved, easily shaken, easily manipulated. But when you detach from what doesn't serve your purpose, you become untouchable. Not because you don't care, but because you care too much about what actually matters. The world doesn't know what to do with someone who doesn't flinch, someone who doesn't get baited into drama, someone who doesn't get pulled into chaos. But that's the posture of dominion. You can walk into a storm and remain centered. You can be surrounded by betrayal and still bless. You can lose what you thought you needed and keep walking like nothing broke. That's not being cold. That's being cold, because a savage doesn't give everything access to their emotions. A savage doesn't hand the steering wheel of their life to temporary people or unstable seasons. They've trained their spirit to be the lead and their emotions to be the servant, not the other way around. People will call it arrogance when you detach. They'll call you distant, prideful, heartless, but that's only because they benefited from your emotional chaos. When you start moving in clarity, they start losing control, and that's why a savage knows how to separate discernment from emotion. Detachment gives you vision. It lets you see clearly what you're really dealing with, because emotion clouds, but spirit cuts through. That's dominion, not over others, but over yourself. Self-mastery is the highest form of power, not power over circumstances, but power over reactions. Detachment says, I'm not here to be understood. I'm here to be obedient. Detachment says, I don't need to explain. My fruit will speak. Detachment says, I walk away from what I want to protect what I'm called to. That's not weakness, that's warrior mentality. Because anybody can chase, beg, react, or perform. But it takes real strength to sit in silence when your flesh wants validation, to walk away without closure, to bless those who curse you and keep building while being overlooked. Savages are silent, not because they're emotionless, but because they found something deeper than feeling foundation. They're not impulsive because they're anchored. They're not unstable because they've already died to the need to be liked. They're not cold, they're focused. They've discovered that dominion starts with choosing your yes and protecting your no. And that kind of spiritual discipline is dangerous to everything trying to distract or derail you. So when you detach, understand this, you're not running from people, you're returning the power. You're not closing your heart, you're guarding your oil. Because detachment isn't about being above anyone. It's about staying beneath God's hand where true dominion flows. A savage doesn't chase feelings. They chase fulfillment. There's a difference between living emotionally and living purposefully. Feelings change with the wind, but fulfillment is rooted in destiny. The problem is too many people are addicted to how something makes them feel. Instead of asking whether it's building them, they get caught in cycles, relationships, routines, habits. Not because it's healthy, but because it feeds a temporary emotion. But a savage doesn't chase the high. Savage chases what's holy. They know that the right decision doesn't always feel good in the moment, but it produces fruit in the long run. You can't live your life on emotional autopilot. You can't keep making decisions based on your mood and expect to walk in mastery. Feelings will lie to you. Feelings will say quit when you're almost at breakthrough. Feelings will say retaliate when you're called to rise. Feelings will say chase them when God already released them. That's why a savage doesn't consult emotions. They consult vision. They consult the mission. They consult what they've been anointed for, not what they're offended by. There's a freedom in being able to feel without being led by feelings. That's what maturity looks like. Maturity is when you say, yes, I feel this, but I won't obey it. When you understand that peace isn't the absence of conflict, but the presence of alignment. And you can't get there if your life is based on what feels good instead of what's right. Chasing fulfillment means you stop asking, does this make me happy? And you start asking, does this grow me? Does this stretch me? Does this please God? Fulfillment is what sustains you when emotions run dry. It's what gets you up when motivation fades. That's why a savage can keep showing up even when it hurts, because they're not fueled by hype, they're fueled by heaven. You won't always feel inspired. You won't always feel supported. You won't always feel appreciated. But a savage doesn't need to feel it to do it. They move because of obedience, not emotion. They're not looking for a feeling, they're looking for fruit. The savage understands that feelings are passengers, not drivers. You acknowledge them, but you don't hand them the wheel. You listen, but you don't submit. That's power. That's discipline. Because feelings are short-term, but fulfillment is eternal. You don't get fulfillment from escaping discomfort. You get it by walking through it. You get it when you keep sowing even when nothing's growing, when you stay planted, even when it looks barren. Because eventually that obedience will turn into overflow. That consistency will turn into clarity. That faithfulness will turn into fire. So stop chasing moments and start building momentum. Stop chasing people who feel good but leave you empty. Stop chasing environments that entertain you but don't elevate you. Start aligning with the things that produce purpose in you. Start locking in with decisions that pull destiny out of you. Because a savage doesn't ask, does this feel good right now? They ask, will this still matter when the storm comes? And if the answer is yes, they move. No hesitation, no apology, no emotion, just obedience. Let go of what was so you can grab hold of what will be. You cannot build the future while holding hands with the past. A savage understands that you can't carry purpose and pain in the same hand. At some point, something has to drop. You have to choose. You have to decide that where you're going is more important than what you've been through. Most people stay stuck, not because they don't have vision, but because they won't release the weight. They replay conversations, relive failures, reopen wounds, and wonder why progress feels impossible. The past becomes a prison when you refuse to close the door. A savage doesn't just survive the past, they outgrow it. Sometimes you gotta mourn and move, grieve and grow. You gotta acknowledge the pain without bowing to it. The enemy will use nostalgia as a weapon, trying to convince you that where you were is better than where you're headed. He'll make you romanticize bondage just because it was familiar. But a savage knows that comfort is not confirmation. Just because it feels safe doesn't mean it's sacred. Just because it's what you've always known doesn't mean it's what you were meant for. Your calling is too great to keep looking backward. You can't drive forward while staring in the rearview mirror. At some point, you got to shift your gaze. You got to stop asking why it happened and start asking what it's building. The pain had a purpose, but it was never meant to be your identity. The betrayal taught you something, but it wasn't meant to be your story's end. A savage doesn't let the past become the filter through which they see the future. They use it as fuel, not a framework. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means no longer allowing what happened to define who you are. It means breaking emotional and spiritual contracts with seasons that have expired. It means forgiving, not always for their sake, but for your freedom, because you can't run with weights tied to your ankles and you can't fly while holding on to chains. A savage sets themselves free on purpose. You got to get honest. How much have you missed because you were still hoping they'd come back? How many doors stayed closed because you kept knocking on old ones? How much energy have you wasted rehearsing what you should have released? A savage gets to the point where they say, enough. I love what was, but I refuse to miss what could be. Faith requires empty hands. Destiny requires available space. You can't receive new direction while carrying inspired expectations. The more you cling to what broke you, the more you delay what's meant to build you. That's why the savage mindset is ruthless about release. They walk away from what no longer aligns. They close chapters even when they don't get closure. They bless what broke them and then they let it go because forward is calling. And whatever is waiting up ahead is worth more than everything that tried to hold them back. A savage cuts emotional cords that drain energy. Not everything connected to you is meant to stay with you. And not everyone who started with you is anointed to finish with you. The longer you keep trying to carry what God told you to release, the heavier your purpose becomes. Sometimes the weight that's wearing you down isn't your calling, it's your attachments. You're drained not because you're weak, but because you're loyal to what's expired. A savage doesn't allow emotional debt to bankrupt spiritual destiny. They understand that energy is sacred, and if something or someone constantly takes without pouring back, it becomes a threat to the assignment. There's a kind of courage that's not loud. It's quiet and deliberate. It's the decision to walk away from people you love because they don't respect your growth. It's the strength to create distance, not because of hate, but because of honor. Honor for what God is doing in you. Not every relationship is toxic, but some are distractions. And not every voice is demonic, but some are dangerous to your development. A savage discerns the difference. They don't wait until it breaks them to realize it wasn't building them. They listen to the subtle signs, the conversations that leave them empty, the energy that feels off, the peace that disappears when certain names show up. And instead of ignoring it, they act. People will call you heartless when you detach. They'll say you switched up. But the truth is, growth always requires separation. Elevation demands clarity, and clarity often brings division. The savage is okay with that. They've made peace with being misunderstood because they've chosen to protect what matters most. You can't carry everyone. You can't save people who don't want change. You can't keep trying to convince people to love you right. At some point, you got to stop bleeding for those who won't even acknowledge your wounds. That's not bitterness. That's wisdom. Cutting the cord doesn't mean you hate them. It means you love yourself enough to heal. It means you realize your purpose is too important to keep making excuses for behavior that consistently dishonors your spirit. You can forgive and still walk away. You can be grateful for the memories and still release the connection. A savage knows how to bless people from a distance, knows how to keep their heart open, but their boundaries firm, knows that loyalty doesn't mean self-abandonment. The savage understands that alignment is more powerful than attachment. It's not about who you like. It's about who sharpens you, who stretches you, who supports the version of you that's becoming not just the one you used to be. And if someone only connects to the older, lesser version of you, then keeping them around is dishonoring the upgrade. That's why a savage cuts the cord, not in anger, but in authority, because their energy is assigned to something greater, and they refuse to be drained by anything that doesn't pour into where they're going. Spiritual detachment isn't apathy, it's alignment. There's a difference between being cold and being called. The world might not understand it. They'll say you've changed, that you're distant, that you don't care, but they don't see what you've been carrying. They don't feel the weight of the assignment on your life. When you begin to align with divine purpose, it naturally pulls you away from anything that threatens your focus. A savage understands that real alignment comes with a cost. And one of the highest costs is the emotional attachment to people, places, and mindsets that no longer fit the mission. You can't hear God clearly when you're entangled in emotional noise, when you're constantly reacting, constantly needing approval, constantly trying to explain yourself to people who were never assigned to your future. That's why detachment becomes necessary. It's not because you don't love them. It's because you love God more. It's because you value peace more than popularity, purpose more than proximity, clarity more than comfort. And when you start choosing what aligns instead of what appeases, things start to shift. People fall away. Conversations dry up. Rooms get quiet. But that silence is sacred. That space is strategic. It's where alignment is birthed. Detachment is a discipline. It's not always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's just a decision you make in your spirit. I'm not going back to that way of thinking. I'm not getting pulled into that argument. I'm not entertaining that version of me anymore. You start to protect your oil like never before. You realize not every battle deserves your energy. Not every comment needs your response. Not every invitation is from God. A savage doesn't just walk away from distraction. They discern them before they even get close. When you're aligned, your life becomes less about emotion and more about execution. You don't move because you feel like it. You move because you're led. You don't stay because it's familiar. You stay because it's fruitful. Alignment puts your soul in sync with your assignment. It gives you vision in the fog. It gives you strength in the silence. It gives you stability in the storm. That's what detachment makes possible. When you stop trying to carry what God never called you to, you make room for what actually belongs to you. A savage knows that divine alignment isn't about being liked. It's about being positioned. Positioned to hear clearly. Positioned to move wisely. Positioned to grow consistently. So they don't chase emotions. They chase elevation. They don't seek comfort. They seek confirmation. And if that confirmation comes with isolation, so be it. If it comes with fewer friends, so be it. If it comes with silence instead of celebration, so be it. Because at the end of the day, spiritual detachment is not distance from people. It's closeness with purpose. That's why the savage is dangerous. Not because they're reckless, but because they're rooted. Not because they're cold, but because they're cold, they walk light. They walk focused, and they walk with power because they've aligned their life with heaven, even if it costs them everything else. You weren't built to break down. You were built to break through. The savage mindset doesn't view pressure as a threat. It sees pressure as proof that something powerful is being formed. Most people collapse under the weight of adversity because they don't understand the assignment hidden inside the struggle. But a savage knows pain isn't always punishment. Sometimes it's preparation. Every breakdown moment is a test to see what you're made of, a test to reveal whether your foundation is emotions or purpose. The ones who break through are not the ones who never felt weak. They're the ones who didn't let weakness make the final decision. Life is going to hit. People will walk away. Doors will close. Opportunities will disappear. There will be moments when it feels like everything is falling apart. But that's when you got to remember what you're built from. You weren't made in comfort. You were forged in fire. God didn't design you to crumble under pressure. He designed you to convert pressure into power. A savage doesn't interpret storms as signs to stop. They see them as invitations to rise. You don't break down in the storm, you become more dangerous in it. Some people confuse struggle with failure. They think just because it hurts, it means they're doing something wrong. But a savage knows that pressure is often the very proof that you're on the right path. Resistance shows up when you're close to revelation. Opposition comes when you're nearing opportunity. So instead of backing down, you press in. Instead of falling apart, you fall into place. You align, you adjust, you elevate. When your emotions scream quit, your purpose must whisper continue. That whisper, that quiet reminder of why you started, is what separates those who endure from those who escape. A savage doesn't bow to breakdowns because they've learned how to find strength in surrender. Not surrender to the pain, but surrender to the process. They understand that what feels like destruction might actually be divine construction, that every time something falls apart, it's God making room for something stronger. You got to train your spirit to see the unseen. When others see loss, you see lesson. When others see delay, you see development. When others panic, you plant your feet and say, this won't bury me, this will build me. That's what it means to break through. It means you walk forward even when everything in you wants to shut down. It means you trust the vision even when the evidence hasn't shown up yet. It means you've made a decision that breakdown is not your final destination. A savage doesn't ask for easier battles. They ask for deeper strength. They don't cry for the storm to stop. They rise with greater faith inside it. And every time life tries to break them, they get more unshakable, more focused, more dangerous, because they know what's inside them was built not just to survive, but to win. Every single time. Your silence is power. Your stillness is strength. In a world that constantly screams for attention, when noise is mistaken for relevance and reaction is mistaken for leadership, the savage understands that true dominance comes in quietness. Not the quiet of defeat, but the quiet of deep internal control. The savage doesn't need to be the loudest in the room to be the most dangerous. Their silence speaks, it commands, it declares without begging, because silence isn't emptiness, it's evidence of stability. It means you don't need to prove what you already know. It means you're not moved by chaos because your inner world is anchored. Stillness isn't weakness, it's mastery. In stillness, the savage listens when others rush. In stillness, the savage waits when others panic. In stillness, the savage sees what others miss. That's where decisions are made. Vision is sharpened and battles are won before they even begin. Stillness is the space where God speaks clearest, where purpose is refined, where noise is filtered out and the real signal is received. A savage doesn't make moves out of impulse. They move out of revelation. And that kind of clarity only comes from stillness. Most people talk because they're unsure. They fill the air with opinions because they're insecure. They move quickly because they fear being left behind. But the savage knows when you're aligned, you don't chase, you attract, you don't force, you allow, you don't compete, you create. And all of that comes from a place of deep inner stillness. You don't need to announce every move, you don't need to explain every decision. When you're truly rooted, silence becomes your strategy and stillness becomes your strength. You've got to learn how to be still. Even when everything around you is moving, even when people are talking, even when situations are changing, even when your emotions are trying to pull you into reaction, a savage doesn't let temporary noise disrupt eternal direction. They know that responding to everything costs energy, and that energy must be protected. They're not ignoring the moment, they're prioritizing the mission. Every response isn't necessary. Every conversation isn't worth entering. Every conflict isn't your assignment. Stillness gives space for power to accumulate. It's not lazy, it's strategic, it's not passive, it's disciplined. When others are draining themselves trying to be seen, a savage is building quietly in the shadows, preparing, sharpening, listening. And when the time is right, they don't speak it, they live it. The results do the talking. The fruit does the shouting. The execution makes the noise. There's a reason God moved in whispers and still small voices, because real power doesn't need to raise its tone. You don't need volume when you have authority. You don't need to be heard when you're chosen. The savage embodies that principle. They've learned to walk with power that doesn't need to prove itself, to move with strength that doesn't demand applause. Their silence is focused, their stillness is sacred, and their discipline makes them unstoppable. Your spirit must lead. Your emotions must follow. A savage understands that the most dangerous thing you can do is let your emotions have the driver's seat in a life that's supposed to be guided by vision. Emotions are real, yes. Emotions are powerful, yes. But emotions were never meant to be the captain of your soul. They were meant to serve, not to steer. And when you allow emotions to dictate your choices, you're no longer walking in destiny. You're reacting to circumstance. But when your spirit leads, you become anchored in something that doesn't shift with moods, pressure, or the environment around you. The spirit sees what the emotions can't. It hears what the noise tries to drown out. Your spirit is where truth lives. It's where peace comes from. It's where discernment, conviction, and alignment are birthed. That's why the savage trains themselves to be led by the spirit, not seduced by the temporary voice of emotion, because emotion will tell you to quit. Emotion will tell you to respond in anger. Emotion will tell you they hurt you, so you should hurt them back. But the spirit says, hold steady, keep walking, forgive anyway, stay on assignment. And the savage listens to the voice that aligns with purpose, not the one that simply pleases the flesh. When your emotions lead, you'll keep repeating the same cycles. You'll keep chasing validation. You'll keep attaching yourself things that feel good, but starve your soul. But when your spirit leads, you choose obedience over comfort. You walk away when it's time, even if your feelings are still lingering. You stay planted even when nothing feels exciting. That's the difference. One path leads to instability. The other leads to unshakable strength. The savage doesn't deny emotion. They acknowledge it, but they don't submit to it. They don't pretend they're above feeling hurt, angry, tired, disappointed, but they don't allow those feelings to become the architect of their decisions. They bring those feelings before God and ask, what do you want me to do with this? That's maturity. That's leadership. That's wisdom. It's saying, I feel it, but I won't follow it. I'm moved by truth, not triggers. Your emotions are loud, but your spirit is loyal. There's still a small voice inside you. That's the compass. And it won't always agree with how you feel, but it will always lead you toward what's right, what's eternal, what's aligned. The savage has learned to recognize the difference. They've learned to pause before reacting, to pray before responding, to seek clarity before making a move, because they understand that being led by the spirit isn't weakness. It's power under control. It's precision in the face of chaos. When you let your spirit lead, your life stops being reactive and starts being intentional. You don't chase everything. You don't fight every battle. You don't answer every call. You move with purpose. You act with conviction. And even when the emotion is strong, the spirit is stronger. That's what makes a savage unshakable. They are governed not by how they feel, but by who they are becoming. Heaven doesn't bless those who beg for comfort. It crowns those who endure fire with faith. A savage understands that favor isn't found in the easy places. It's forged in the flames. Everybody wants the crown, but very few are willing to carry the cross that comes with it. Most people pray for purpose, but run from pressure. They want elevation without endurance. But a savage knows that fire is not the enemy. It's the proving ground. Fire is where purity is revealed. Distractions are burned off and power is refined. You don't come out of the fire the same. You come out unshakable, untouchable, and undeniable. There's no greatness without sacrifice. There is no breakthrough without battle. If you want to carry something from heaven, you got to be willing to endure what earth throws at you. You have to be able to stand in the storm and still believe, to walk through rejection and still serve, to be overlooked, underestimated, betrayed, and still keep showing up. Not because it's comfortable, but because you know who you are. That's the savage mindset. I don't need the road to be smooth. I just need to know it's the one God called me to. Comfort is a trap. It whispers to your emotions, telling you to settle, to rest too soon, to take your hands off the plow. But crowns are not given to the comfortable. They're placed on the heads of those who kept going when it would have been easier to quit. A savage doesn't beg for the fire to stop. They ask for the strength to endure it. They don't ask God to remove the mountain. They ask for the legs to climb it, because they know that the anointing flows where obedience is tested. The fire is never just about survival. It's about transformation. You were never meant to just get through the storm. You were meant to come out changed, stronger, sharper, clearer. with more authority, with more discernment, with more oil. That oil doesn't come cheap. It's pressed out of you in the moments nobody sees, in the quiet nights when you're questioning if it's worth it, in the silence after the door slams shut, in the heartbreak of obedience. But every time you choose to keep walking, every time you choose to trust God instead of your emotions, you've been crowned in the spirit. Even if no one claps in the natural, heaven sees what you endure. Every tear, every prayer, every moment you could have chosen comfort, but chose character instead. That's what qualifies you, not talent, not appearance, not even opportunity, but endurance. The crown doesn't come to those who ask for an easier path. It comes to those who walk the hard one with unwavering faith. So the savage doesn't fear fire. They understand it. They know that fire isn't the end. It's the announcement that something royal is being formed. They were built for this, born for this. And they walk through every trial with the quiet confidence of someone who knows a crown is waiting on the other side. So now you know this life isn't for the faint of heart. It's for the focused, the called, the committed. It's for the one who refuses to be ruled by emotions, controlled by comfort, or trapped by attachment. It's for the one who doesn't just talk power, they walk in it. This world doesn't need more people trying to fit in. It needs more savages, people who are dangerous to their doubt, relentless in their discipline, and violent with their vision. A savage isn't just a mindset, it's a spiritual posture. It means you've made peace with walking alone if it means walking in purpose. It means you've decided that validation isn't your fuel. Obedience it means you looked your pain in the face and said, you won't define me. You develop me. You stared down rejection, silence, betrayal, fear, and still chosen to build, to believe, to become. So if you feel the fire, walk through it. If you feel the pressure, embrace it. If you hear the calling, answer it with everything you've got. Don't shrink back. Don't wait for approval. Don't apologize for your hunger, your standards, your vision, your strength. Be a savage, unapologetically, unshakably, unstoppably, because you weren't built to break. You were born to break through. And this is your moment to rise. Tools. ChatGPT